Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Brendan Hauser with EVOQ Bike. I have a really interesting podcast today. $560 bib shorts. What? I laughed when this guy emailed me, but Gil had reached out from Rubber and Road, and we were chopping it up about he has this business. It's a high-end cycling brand, but he was also talking about weight loss, and he lost 55 pounds. I said, dude, I want to talk to you about this, but I'm only going to talk about these shorts. Yeah, I got to try them. I'm never going to talk about something on this podcast that I haven't tried. He's like, yeah, I'll send you a pair. Holy crap. Next level. I'm actually going to split this podcast into two. The weight loss part is really interesting, but the whole Atelier, how they make this, we talk about private equity in cycling, how a Shammy interacts with a short, the paneling, the stitching, the 8 people involved in making this. I did not think learning about bib shorts was going to be very interesting. I told Gil this. Obviously, this is not a product for everybody. And I will say, I will just leave the intro with this. These shorts have made me realize there are other things in the shorts that I love that are now annoying. And so that's frustrating because these shorts are over $500. But with holidays coming up, your birthday is sometime in the next 365 days. It's something to keep your eye on. Really interesting brand. Gil, thanks so much for shining light on why this would even be so expensive in the first place. Everybody, good luck with your training and racing in whatever bib shorts you're wearing. Hopefully bib shorts. Definitely need bib shorts. And check out the blog. Check out the YouTube videos for other free tips to help you get faster. If you need a coach, hit us up for that. Good luck with your training, racing. Crush it. Let's go.
Hey, Brandon.
Gil, what's going on, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, man. Stoked to chat. Thanks for making time to connect this morning.
For sure. Thank you for having me.
Yes. I see you're in the... I don't want to say studio. What's the right word for that room?
We can call it studio. That's okay. We call it the Atelier. That's the second floor at Rubber and Road. But that's where we create our products and design the collections and, yeah, run the brand from too.
And that term is sort of like not a high fashion term, but maybe it is. What exactly is Atelier? It's like the not seamstress. Give me the background here.
Well, I think that for us, we like to use this word because one of the things that define us is the commitment to actually create garments with the idea in mind to enhance the experience of athletes on the bike. And the way for us to do it is to come here every day and play with fabrics and constructions and patterns and be able to really make a difference in how we construct things. And so it is kind of way that describes an old world method, maybe, of thinking about garments, but we're doing it in a way that is very technical and technological, if that makes sense.
Oh, dude, that's cool, man. This is like a podcast is rolling basically. So let's get an intro going. And this is such an interesting podcast because we have Rubber and Road, but I love your personal story that you reached out to me, and I'll tell people kind of just how we sort of connected. But first, give me an intro. Who is Gil Lavi?
Oh God,
and where are you right
that's
now?
that's that's a long one, but I'll try to make it short. I'm in New York City, Midtown Manhattan, 51st, 466 West 51st Street. We actually have this address on many of our garments because we like the idea of having a physical space where we meet people and people can come, and also it's our house in a way for the brand. I came to New York. I studied here at the School of Visual Arts. Most of my life I've been in the art world, but I always really liked making things. And cycling is always been kind of my greatest interest. My dad was a cyclist in the 1960s in Israel. In his best days, he came second at the National Championship of 1962. And cycling back then was really, I think, kind of like the house I grew up in, like the photos and everything. Like when he was riding, it was so extreme to ride in a country that was basically almost not really established. And the people who he was riding with kind of came from all over the world, right? So there were always these photos of really diverse looking groups of people that didn't even completely spoke the same languages, riding together, looking like they're out of like a French cycling magazine. And I always really loved that aesthetic as a kid, but also just like how out of place it looked, like cycling had its own kind of thing. And when I moved to New York in my early 20s, it was really when, not early 20s, late 20s. I wish it was early 20s. When I moved to New York in my late 20s, that's where I really started riding more. I mean, as a teenager, I was riding BMX and stuff like that. But when I was starting to ride more road bikes, it was my late 20s. And I think it was the proximity to the park, but also being far from my family, it was a way to reconnect with my dad a little bit and having something to talk about. But also, as a kid, as a teenager, I used to sit with him and watch Eurosport, looking constantly at like bike races. And all of a sudden I realized, I can actually go see these places, ride them, if I get fit enough. And that's kind of how I got into riding more and more. After I finished my master's, I actually ended up starting working in the cycling industry for different brands on the creative side and some product side. I met Max Davis, my business partner, who used to work at Rafa back then, who was always a much better cyclist than I am. And we ended up starting Rubber and Road. Besides that, I guess, the other thing I really wanted to talk about is that, I guess around when we started Rubber and Road, I really kind of lost touch with cycling in terms of actually practicing. When we started the brand, it was 100+ hours a week of work, 7 days a week. And a little bit before that, I had some injury that was hard to get out of. During this time, I gained a ton of weight. And it's really been crazy. In 2023, I went to visit Mallorca to set up some space for a pop-up, to scout some spaces. And I decided to go ride a ride that I've done a little bit before, a few years prior. And I was there with my husband, and I told him, that's going to take like 3 hours. I think it's been 5 hours later that I was still struggling to make my way back. And that's where I realized, wow, I've gotten like in these 4 years of starting Rubber and Road, I've gotten really out of shape. I've gotten really heavy. I lost all of my fitness, and that was not cool.
That's so for people that wonder, they might think we have like this New York connection or something. Gil had reached out to me just saying, hey man, I've, listened to your podcast. I've read the blogs. I lost, and correct me if I'm wrong, 55 pounds, which is freaking amazing, dude.
Thanks.
And that always strikes a chord with me. That's how I got into cycling. I got out of the shower one day, looked in the mirror, and I was like, damn, dude, this is not a good look. Lost a little over 30 pounds. And so weight loss, I think, is just such a tough thing in our society. And I feel so grateful that I found cycling to, fall in love with the sport, but also achieve that goal. And then you're like, yeah, and I have these bib shorts in this company and da-da-da. And we'll get into those. So I think part of this podcast is going to be the weight loss, because that's applicable to a lot of people.
Of course.
Your brand is high tier, the upper echelon of garments. And I'm going to tell everybody straight up. I told Gil, I said, hey, I'm not really willing to talk about your products if I've never seen them. He's like, cool, I'll send you a pair of these bib shorts. These bib shorts are expensive. They are over $500. And when I first looked that up, I laughed a little bit. And I said, oh man, I'm going to have to tell this guy that we're not going to be able to talk about these, because they're going to be like every other bib short. And the best way, without going into products and features, like a bullet list yet, these shorts made me realize that there are things about normal bib shorts that irritate me that I didn't know about. So now I'm a little upset, because these have made me, and I love LEL. I actually reached out to them because they work with EVOQ. I don't want to piss them off by having someone else that makes product. And I said, hey, guys, this guy reached out. I want to do a podcast about weight loss. He also has these shorts. He has a 3D printed chamois. You guys cool with this? And they're like, yo, man, we're great with this. We love cycling. We love sharing stories like this. Go for it. And that is just another testament, not to talk brand over brand, but just that they're in it for the love of cycling, which is one reason why I really love working with them. But dude, these shorts, and we'll get to them in more detail. Holy crap. I've ridden in Rafa stuff. I've ridden in, I want to go into other brand names, high end shorts that are over $250. And I kind of started thinking, okay, once you're over 250, it's just brand name. Man, dude, the details, the comfort, and I'm doing these on 5-6 hour rides only. And yeah, dude, you guys are onto something. And I, for people who are like, I'm not able to spend $500 in a short, this technology will trickle down at some point. So just know garments are going to continue to get better, because it's like, I love wearing these shorts. All right, part 2 of the podcast. What year did Rubber and Road start?
Rubber and Road started in 2020.
Okay.
During COVID.
Interesting time.
It was, Max and I were working together before with different brands in the cycling industry on product market fit, a little bit of work with athletes, etc. And I felt like there was a big discrepancy, let's say, between what was available for riders in the market back then, in cycling, in the US especially, versus what was going on in Europe. Because I think because for me, a lot of my love for the sport was actually about traveling and getting out there and going to Mont Ventoux and going to Girona. Like, for me, like, a lot of my passion for the sport was about the places and getting fit enough to be able to do these rides that I've seen as a kid, right? And when I would go to these places, I'd see a lot of different brands and a lot of different ways to engage with the sport and express yourself as an athlete. Versus in the US, you had like really a few large brands. That's the only thing you could find in like bike shops. Maybe you had Rafa in Apparel, which was also a very kind of like brand that's focused on marketing and storytelling more than, let's say, having this direct access to athletes and how to improve their lives. And I definitely think that we are in a golden age in terms of like how many good products there are out there for cyclists, right? A lot of times there are people, let's say, criticizing prices or stuff like that. It's not something that really worries me. But what I would say about that is that there is so much good kit out there that people can get today for cheaper than ever, relatively to the quality that you're getting from a whole multitude of brands, that nobody needs another more than that, right? There's a lot of things, if you're going to do a couple of hours ride in the park, that you can enjoy today, and that's like great. It's more accessible than ever. But for us, the mission from the beginning, and we didn't start by making our own product, but the mission from the beginning was, how do we inspire more people about cycling through really understanding how we improve their experiences and how they want to express themselves. And I knew a few different founders of brands that were independent at the time, and I felt like, let's reach out to them and try to work with them on bringing these products and kind of bridging the gap between the local cycling culture and global cycling culture. And in the beginning, we basically started by setting up a website with some routes that you can ride around New York City, and a chatbot that said, like, if people are entering the sport, like, if you have questions, if there's something we can do, chat with us. From there, we started offering some products on the site with same-day delivery in New York by bike. That was kind of like a cool COVID thing that allowed us to really interact with people directly in a time that almost nobody did, right? Like we'd show up on people's doors, at people's doors. And as time passed by, we've seen a lot of these brands getting sold to private equities one after another, and kind of making the same exact product with the same ingredients that, again, not to say that they are bad products, but they weren't really interested in coming in, day out, and thinking, how are we going to improve the experience of athletes on the bike and enable them to go farther, faster, feeling better, right? And aesthetics is also, of course, part of it, but it's not everything, right? Yes, we want people to like feel really good about how they look on the bike. I think that a bib is better if it makes your butt looks good versus like, okay, it's part of it. But it's not the main part. The main part for us was the idea that in fashion, in other arenas on the highest level, a lot of houses will have an atelier, studio upstairs that is really focused on creating garments that are absolutely state of the art in what they're trying to achieve, and they would have a boutique downstairs where clientele can come and you can engage and learn from your customers exactly what they want and what they need and what they're after. And I always loved making things. I studied aesthetic theory. That's what my master's focus on at the School of Visual Arts, which is really about how things make us feel, and of course products in that sense, especially product that you have is like it's your contact point with the sport, right? More than the bike, more than anything, what your experience as a rider is your apparel. And I really wanted to push the limits there and build something that never really existed in cycling and still doesn't. There is nowhere in the world that you have a studio upstairs that builds and develops many of its products just right there, right? And we make a great part of them in New York City too, which is unique in the sense that it allows us to really be involved in every stitch, in every yarn, in every aspect of the production in a way that doesn't really exist almost in cycling, maybe with very few exceptions. And it's kind of like with training. It's about coming in, day out, trying to like improve things in a very slow manner, right? So something like these Bib shorts, for example, yes, the technology for sure is going to trickle down in terms of the 3D and other things 100%. But the main point is the effort that you have to put in terms of hours, days, weeks, and years in refining how different panels interact, how different yarns and fabrics feel. And, you know, yes, there's the conceptual part of, for example, how do we make a bib where you have like incredible sense of freedom in terms of the quads and the leg movements, while keeping your frontal area and your seat bones area in terms of the fabric panels really stable, right? There is no pulling and no pushing in terms of like how the stitching is constructed and how the panels are built. And so, yes, those are ideas that are maybe conceptual, but then to actually make them walk and the garment move and perform the way you want, that takes a really, really long time. Like that takes years from the let's say from the insight to something that actually perform the way that you want takes years. And making it in New York City is also really expensive, right? The minimum wage here is $15 an hour. A good seamstress gets paid much more than that, and then to actually complete a product like the Control Bib shorts, you have to have about 8 different people involved in this process who know how to do different stitches really well. So I would make all the prototypes for this over years. I know how to make all of these stitches, but I don't know how to make any of these stitches as good as each of these people, right? So I, of course, in that sense, I'm the architect, but if I want the building to be built really well, you have to really create a team that can support what you do. And this is really, really difficult in New York as well, because we have here a lot of artisans that are amazing, but they are used to making prototype suits for Ralph Lauren, maybe not really working with technical apparel. And so there's a lot of learning that both we need to do, and then to also transfer this knowledge to people who can actually execute and work with us. So that's kind of like the one aspect of the design and construction. And then there's the research, right? So the Shammy is important, not to say that it's not an important part of the Bib, it is, but it's not really the only or the most important part in terms of the experience of how a garment feels, right? And that's kind of like what we care about the most. Like, I will talk about the chamois a little bit. So one of the things that we obviously do is to always really look at many different chamois and from, almost every production method and brands. And so, for example, here we have a chamois that features a piece of fabric that is glued to a foam that is compressed, and then it's glued again to another piece of fabric. So the obvious issue here, besides the fact that foam, you can always completely flatten it, but the obvious issue is that the gluing process make breathability much lower, okay? Because you have glue between the fabrics and the foam. The other thing is that it limits how the shaping of the pad can be done, right? Another example, we're looking at, literally looked at about few hundreds bibs in this process, but basically most of these chamois are just made from the same kind of foams with different densities and the same gluing technology. When you glue a chamois, it's just a lot cheaper than other options that are like, let's say, one of the things that we do. So this is a glued chamois. As you can see, this one is completely flat. This is the chamois that is in most of our bibs, which is stitched into an ergonomic position. So we actually use this in most of our race bibs, because what it allows us to do is to ensure that there can be no chafing and no movement even under a lot of load. So the chamois really stays in exactly the same spot because it follows the body. There is no way for it to move. And because we're using a stitching technology for the panels, so there is no glue at all involved, and it's fully perforated as well. So it also allows us to provide a lot more breathability. Now, obviously, to make something like that is a lot more challenging technically. Some of the panels here are assembled in ultrasonic technology, basically, where different fabrics are combined to provide different type of breathability and sensations, but basically you have to make each...
All right, what is that? What's ultrasonic? So you're combining two different materials to make one?
Correct. And
okay.
And yeah, and so a chamois like that is a lot more labor intensive, let's say, than something like that, where a machine can just push against a few panels and glue them together. Why would you do that? It's this feeling when you get out of the saddle of nothing moves, of complete stability. It's the ability to really make sure that no matter how aggressive or relaxed your position is, there is not going to be any movement. Now, the bib itself is not something that is separated from the chamois, right? So when we are walking and creating a chamois that is ergonomically shaped, the shape of the bib will be following the logic of the chamois. They are developed together. They're not really two separate things. If we're looking at the 3D bib Shammy, the Shammy that we're using in our Control 3D bib shorts. It is actually, because of the technology of the printing, we have to use a flatter platform. And so the entire design of the Control 3D bib short is made so it provides that ergonomic support to this Shammy, if that makes sense. And that was kind of the biggest challenge in the development of the shorts. And I think looking at the reviews that our Control bib shorts received relatively to other bib shorts that are now using this technology, it's clear that that's where our success has been in terms of really creating a pattern that can allow us to do with a 3D printed Shammy what we were able to provide in terms of the general support and stability with our ergonomically shaped foam Shammys. So just to show a little bit the differences though, so this is the insert that we have in the Control 3D bib Shammy, and what this insert enables relatively to foam, there's a lot greater resistance. It's not just a matter of density. You can't really fully compress it. There is no way because of the polymer that's used. B, there's tiny perforations that allow us to provide a lot more breathability than foam. And unlike foam, it doesn't retain moisture almost at all. So it also allows us to keep the rider much drier. And we can create different densities within the same continuous printed panel. Versus with foam, we have to use many different pieces that are combined together. And that creates always kind of like areas where there is a much more pronounced differentiation in terms of the density that we have to consider in the development process. And so it's just allow us more control in the design as well. And I think that it's not that foam is bad and 3D is amazing. They both have their ups and downs. But I would say that as far as we're talking long endurance rides, there are massive advantages to using 3D printed technology because you can retain the support for much longer with 3D inserts versus foam inserts. And you can keep the rider a lot drier and more comfortable as well.
What would be a downside to the 3D printed? Did I miss that? Because it's...
Yeah, so the downside right now for us is the ability to shape the Shammy inserts exactly the way that we want. And so we have to do a lot more of the work in the specific pattern of the bib to kind of build that support. And that's okay. It's not a huge it's not a huge disadvantage, but it's just a consideration of like you have to do a lot of things differently to make it work well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the words that you were talking about when you mentioned panels and stitching, you guys have nailed this in that there was never any, I can only speak from a man's point of view, but sometimes you have to readjust things because you're like, ooh, my shorts are kind of like not like vibing at hour 4 or 5. That never happened. And I don't think there is a stitch to really make that happen. The other thing, it's the breathability that I didn't even realize that was going on. Man, I was, after a 5.5 hour ride, like, I don't know if you're going super easy, you're going to be sweating, but you never had that like bibs sucked to your body feeling.
Yeah.
They just felt like you kind of forgot you were wearing them. And the thing that I never thought about how a chamois is related to the rest of the short and the movement of your thigh as you're pedaling, you're smashing, you're getting out of the saddle. These things don't move, but they move with you. That is probably one of the best things I noticed about them is that it was never, the short was never in the way, or I guess you never had to like fix something or fiddle with something. And I just sort of always thought that's what a short is. Like you're wearing this garment and you're trying to ride a bike, which is a very funny movement anyways. Now hearing the story, of how you guys, the iterations and thinking through all of this and how much time it takes. I mean, so really the price tag is that all the technology, the specialized workers, there's no way to really make this much less expensive. And you guys got to make money doing it. So and people, you guys can look these up. It's the Rubber and Road Control 3D bib short. You're probably going to see a Velo News article. They did a comparative review and they said these shorts are on a quote unquote another level. And when I read that, I was like, okay, we'll see about that. I was like, man, these shorts are on another level. And I will say the one thing, so I've worn them on 3 5-hour plus long rides. So I've only been able to wash them obviously 3 times. Durability. Is there any less durability in a high-end garment like this, or where does that usually fall into play?
I would say that in this garment, durability is not really an issue. The durability is really high. But I do think that's a good point, actually, to kind of touch on briefly. A lot of times with really high-end garments, actually durability is a concern. Because when you're really pushing yarns and fabrics to an extreme for performance purposes, some things have to give sometimes, right? And so it's not really an issue with the Control 3D bib because it is very endurance oriented. But definitely when you're pushing on like trying to create the lightest ever, most breathable mesh jersey, it's not going to be as durable as other things, you know, because that's not what it's meant to do. So definitely I think it is worth considering that when you're looking at like super high-end garments, durability is not always the number one concern. Like there are garments that we're definitely thinking about. This is a real race item. It's for like the hottest, worst days of the year. It's not for like your 6-7 hour rides day in day, like, you know, like that you're gonna do like multiple times a week, every week, right? And so, yeah, in the case of the Control bib, the durability is designed to be pretty high. But actually, I will show you a couple of things while we're at it.
And I'll add to that from my anecdotal experience of it. The fabric is so nice, but it, like you said, it's not that it's a lighter. It doesn't feel like super thin and it's going to lose its shape. I've tried bibs that have had that issue where after 3 washes, they are almost a totally different product.
Yeah.
And even it's like the straps, how the strap attaches to the bib. When you said the aesthetic, man, I put these on the first time, but I was like, damn, I look good in these shorts. What is up with this? Like, it is clearly made by someone thinking about this. You didn't just slap straps on. And so, if someone can afford a $500 pair of bibs and Christmas is coming up, this is what you want to be asking for, I think. I mean, it is a luxury item, but it has performance. You're not buying this and, you know, not going to use it. You're going to want to use it every day.
I mean, you know, I think I want everything, right? I'm greedy. I want it to be the best performing. I want it to be looking good, right? I think that part of making the sport more attractive and making the sport more inspiring and interesting to people to join, you need to be able to look good. Like, you know, like I think it's really important. And looking good, I'm not talking about some silly print or something like that. I'm talking about really considering how does this thing make somebody look and feel, you know? And I think that it's a big part of like confidence also, which is important for performance. And yeah, so there was definitely a lot of consideration in a garment like that. It kind of sounds funny, but like we're working on millimeters, right? Of like you're moving something like a few millimeters here, a few millimeters there to like really find the balance between freedom of movement, muscle compression, aesthetics, you know, it's a lot of things. And so sometimes you get into these like black holes of like trying to refine and refine and refine and refine and refine, and then you come up with on the other side of something really different, right? One of the things that I really wanted to do with this bib is really limit the number of panels we're using to an extreme, because it creates a certain look, right? But then you have to like make that look works too, and that's a challenge. Yeah,
and you have slightly different body parts all going into a medium, slightly different body parts all going into a large. Like for anyone who's made clothes, they're like, oh my gosh, this sounds insane. But if you haven't, try and make a t-shirt. Think about cutting those panels out, where you're going to put the seam, da da da. It's, I mean, clothes, I love fashion in general, but the actual making of it, I told someone, this is like a decade ago, I'm like, we should like try and make jeans. And she laughed at me. She's like, do you know how hard that is?
it is.
So
It is, but there's a point in which you have to understand like who you are making what for, and I think that's kind of like a massive difference between us and every brand out there, because most private equity brands, which are now pretty much almost every brand out there, like 99.9% in the cycling industry, like since the last 2 years, they are feeling like they have to sell massive quantities of garments to massive number of people. And so they have to cater for so many different fits and needs. And our focus was kind of singular, which is why I felt like I really need to mold myself into the brand too. Because the clothes were always about creating garments for people who really care about a specific fit, a specific look, a specific way of pushing themselves, right? Like, if you're not really going to push yourself all the way, you don't need us, if that makes sense. We're absolutely, we're pretty extreme with our fit, we're pretty extreme with the materials. They cost a lot of money. I think most people will never imagine. I think most people would be shocked if they knew how much some of the fabrics cost. I can tell you in general, some of them cost more than $70 per yard.
Wow.
Just in terms of raw material, which is insane.
Yeah, because then you don't even get to use all of that.
Correct.
You cut it.
Correct.
Yeah, how much you weight, has to go.
Exactly. And the truth of the matter is that not everybody who rides bike needs that level of technical innovation, right? Like, right? But if you are going on these 5, 6, 7 hour rides, if you are pushing yourself really hard, there are real benefits that you can get, because this is like the main thing. That's the main thing that like stands between you and the experience of riding, is your apparel, right? To me, it's kind of always really funny to see people riding really expensive, super high-end bikes in kits that are like, let's say, okay, but not that great. Like, I find that really funny, because you're not, like, the difference in your experience riding is not really going to come from the bike as much as it's going to come with, like, how are your contact points on the bike, are your gloves, your socks, your bibs, your jersey, right? Like, that's kind of like what actually determines your day in, day out experience. And so I find it funny how people think about that. And
let me jump in there. Sorry to cut you off. And your fitness. I think for the newer cyclists, people are like, I need this S-Works bike. I'm like, you should probably lose 20 pounds and ride a little bit more, and you'll feel way better. I promise you. It's not the bike.
Yeah. I think that was always something that was really funny to me, like still is, how much emphasis people put on bikes. And don't get me wrong, I'm all in for really nice bikes. I think they're helping to push the envelope forward. Like, I think I really don't like when people blame like the bike prices of like people not riding bike. It's really not true. Like, to me, if we want to bring more people to the sport, people want to be inspired. People want to know there's a next level. People want, even if you're not buying a Ferrari, it's nice to know that Ferraris exist.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's aspirational, and it makes you dream about becoming a better driver. So I'm absolutely all in for innovation and pushing the boundaries, and I don't have an issue with expensive bikes, but I'm also like absolutely like not into people thinking that they have to have an expensive bike to be fit or to be a good cyclist, right? Because at the end of the day, yes, regardless of like kit, regardless of bike, regardless of wheels, the fastest guy is the coolest guy, right? Like, let's just be clear about that. That being said, even the fastest guy can be a lot more comfortable and a lot more and achieve a lot more with the right equipment. I think that we have now, not to insult anyone or starting any wars with any brands, but when Tadej Pogacar won his first Tour de France, he had far from the best equipment or team that were available back then. And that didn't really matter, right? I mean, the situation might be different now, but in the end of the day, the athletes are what makes the sport cool, yes. But we need to create really great products if we want people to be inspired and enjoy this sport to like how much it can be enjoyable. And I'll show you one thing.
Yeah, and actually, I have two. I have a comment and I have a question about something you said before about private equity. But to your point that you were saying about the equipment, I've ridden a $6,000 bike frame, which is insane to me, and I've ridden a $3,000 race aero frame, and the $3,000 frame has been faster in. And I know I don't want to name brands and get into it because I don't want to poo-poo on a brand, but just because it's more expensive doesn't mean it's better for you. And I think the same question I get from new athletes all the time. Hey, I'm getting Shimano. Do I need Dura Ace or is Ultegra okay? And people are blown away when I tell them I race on Ultegra, and they're like, why? I'm like, okay, yeah, it's a little weight penalty. The functionality is amazing. It is like right next to Dura Ace. I've ridden Dura Ace. It's great. Not a knock on it. But I'm buying spare parts. I don't get those for free. So if I rip a derailleur off or something happens to my shifter because I ride 20,000 miles a year, it's way nicer to spend $250 than $700. And if you have an unlimited budget, go for it. There's nothing against the Ferrari, as you're saying, but you might not need that to get to your goal.
100%.
What's the deal with private equity? Do you know why is there so much private equity in the cycling brands of the past few years? When you mention that, I have always found it interesting. I'm like, oh, this brand got sold this, and yeah, maybe it's not starting to work, but the brands kind of go downhill a little bit because it's just sales numbers, and they lose the essence, it seems like, of what started the brand.
Well, I think that like every private equity brand out there works basically on makes product based on Excel sheets, right, of metrics. We have this recreational rider who thinks that he's that, who wants to believe that he's this, and that's his persona, and let's make them now a bib in these colors that embody their persona and in this fit that makes them feel good about themselves. And the reasons there's so much private equity money in cycling now, I think, is that during COVID, you've seen a boom in people entering the sports. And for private equities, it's not really about the specific brands, but it is about the industry, right? So let's say one private equity that specializes in like sports. They have one company that does like skis, one company that does like, I don't know, running shoes, one company that does like running clothes, etc. They see a competitor buying a cycling apparel brand during COVID, and they say, oh, if cycling is going to explode and we're not going to have a brand like that in our portfolio, our numbers can fluctuate in an asymmetric way, and so we need to have a horse in that game, right?
Right.
And I think the issue is that most of these private equities really don't understand cycling. They don't really understand this niche. And like, it was really funny to me, like last year, I will tell you a little bit of disclaimer. The owner of what is like the largest brand in cycling, I guess, from like the cool cycling brands, have shopped at this store. Let's say. B, I think what I don't really understand about cycling is just like the sport is still very small, unfortunately, as much as it's growing, right? And there's only so many people with need to real exceptional garments. And so it creates this situation where there's really unrealistic expectations in terms of what they can sell, who they can sell to. And it ends up with these brands coming into these companies saying, okay, now you're not going to make like your products with artisans in Italy that really know how to work with stretch fabrics and woven fabrics and this. We're going to take your production, we're going to make it in Vietnam or China or wherever. We're going to increase the quantities tenfold to bring down the prices of like making the product from X to tens of X. We're going to invest a ton of marketing money, tons of money on ambassadors, and that's how we're going to grow the brands. We're going to open stores, blah, 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 blah. Doesn't really seem to work in the long term in cycling. I think what it does, though, is it adds a lot of waste. A lot of people buy garments that are never going to wear. I think that it creates a lot of disruptions to innovations and retailers. I think it's also one of the reasons that one of the things that are in a way good for us is that one of the goals of private equities is also to control the market, right? One of the bets there is that if they can get enough scale, they can control the innovation cycles. They can decide when 3D bib shorts get to the market or not. They can own a lot of the supply chain, etc. And so for private equities, the existence of brand like us is not really a fun thing. Because we can make a lot better products because we are much more focused on the product as athletes who actually use it and live in it. But it's tough because, like with everything, it also has the other side of it, which is, does it increase the visibility of the sport? Sure. Does it really elevate the experience of athletes? Not really.
Interesting. All right, I cut you off. Well, you're about to show me something. What was that?
I will show you one of my last thing. Since I might be the least qualified athlete to ever participate in this vlog, and we were talking mostly about the Control 3D bib short, which is really focused on endurance riding and base miles, but one of the products I'm really proud of that we released this year is our skin suit, which has a few little technical gadgets in it, like raised, it's basically, it's hard to see, but those are raised 3D air channels that help us both with aerodynamics, breathability, and wicking. And so what they do is that they push the fabric away from the body, so there is a space between the body and the fabric. We have here fully woven.
That more, so that's more for wicking as opposed to aerodynamics, correct?
Mostly for wicking. It helps with aerodynamic, but marginally.
Okay.
The entire suit is made from woven materials that offer about 40% more compression than traditional lycra. Fully aero materials, of course, that are engineered aerodynamically. But we're also featuring a material on the bottom that help us increase durability, because we spoke about durability earlier, significantly by protecting the Shammy. It includes special yarns about 15 times stronger than steel wires.
What? That's crazy.
Correct. And as you can see,
so it actually looks like like you can see that though on the outside, right? Like Correct. It looks like a different butt panel.
Correct. And
how do you, as a guy who likes aesthetic, how do you feel about that?
I really like it. I really like the feel of the material, and it is designed in a way that it looks good on the body. It works really well, and as you can see, it retains its ergonomic shaping completely. So because of the way that it's sewn and designed, we can really keep it in the shape of the body on the bike on its own.
I'm gonna have to consider that because I have to get a skin suit this year because I'm building a TT bike right now. So
This
I'm
one is
in.
crazy tight though, just so you know. It's pretty extreme.
I like extreme. Let's go. I'm
Exactly.
still gonna be a large. I'm still gonna be a large though, or so we'll see.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
awesome.
awesome, man.
Thanks.
Dude, this was. I actually might split this into two podcasts because really the topics are so different for people. Maybe we'll do the $500 bib shorts and then the weight loss. But what? Any final thoughts on Rubber and Road? I really appreciate you sharing. Like, it was so interesting to learn a little bit more about the process and just hearing your mindset as someone who's been through design and production and working with a team just to produce one pair of bib shorts. Any last thoughts or comments you want to get across to people?
I guess one thing is that I think a lot of people are asking themselves, is this brand good? Is this product good? See people like going to stores, touching fabrics, trying to figure out a lot of things that are very difficult for them to really understand. You know, it's like trying to find the solutions to training online. There's just so much, right? In the end of the day, it's about understanding who cares about your experience as an athlete, right? Like, do you think a private equity that holds 20 different assets and runs its business by Excel is going to make the best product for you? Or is it going to be somebody who's really living the sport and goes in every day to make everything just a little better? And I think on that note, after my ride yesterday, I was riding through Park Avenue and I saw one of our customers, who's like very successful businessman in New York. And every time I see him, he starts like talking to me about like a million different ideas that he has for us. So I told him, I love all of your ideas, but the problem is that we are a global brand, but also a small business. And he said to me, it sounds to me not like a problem, but a golden opportunity. And in that sense, I think what I love about Rubber and Road is that we are here. People can meet us, people can come. We walk the floor the same way that we walk the studio. And yeah, if people are interested to learn more, they are welcome to reach out. Follow us on Instagram at Rubber and Road, or me personally. I've also been sharing through the stories this year a lot more on my stories on Instagram, a lot more of kind of like the journey that I've been through in terms of getting back to shape. And I'll probably change a little bit the way I have been doing that, because the beginning it was really sharing a lot of like in text, a lot of the literal things that I was doing and kind of my thoughts and my goals and my process. But I definitely hope that I can inspire anyone, help anyone. And yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about it at all, but also, Brandon, I guess it's also like one of the things that happens for this podcast. I met another gay cyclist, and I think that is something that is important for me to like, has been important for me to make more aware of this year about myself, because that's kind of part of a longer process. I was invited 2 years ago by Time Out, actually, to be on a Pride panel inviting different New York business owners to speak. It was more about entrepreneurship than sports. But after I've done that, I had some parents of athletes who were LGBT reaching out to me, and some athletes as well. And I felt like I kind of have responsibility to share a bit more about my experiences, which has been really difficult because I've always been very shy and introverted, but kind of came out of this shell a little bit the past couple of years, because that's been something that I think is really important. And I started to learn more and more this year, reading some reports starting to follow the Trevor Project, others about like how difficult still it is for young LGBT people to participate in sports, and how challenging it is. And so it's definitely something that became more and more important to me, and also helped me fuel this journey at some points, if that makes sense. Like, it's definitely something that's been like on my mind, that like there's a lot of things that maybe didn't stop me, but it definitely slowed me down in terms of like what I wanted to do athletically, because of like my fears, prejudices, you know, etc. So definitely this year, in that sense too, like mentally, that's something that has been back of mind for sure.
Yeah, when you had made that comment to me in the email, I think I had replied back to you one time like, "Oh, sorry, I'm on the road. My responses were like kind of slow. My husband, blah blah blah." And you're like, "Oh, dude, I didn't realize you were gay," and I kind of like that, because the way I look at it personally is I'm totally open. I hope, I think most, maybe I'm wrong. I feel like maybe not on the EVOQ podcast. I feel like on my own Instagram, people know, like, I post pictures of my husband, da da da. But I've always wanted to like proudly hold the flag without feeling like I'm shoving it down someone's throat. And it's, definitely a huge part of me, a huge part of my life. From the sports side, I think sports helped me in feeling okay about myself when I couldn't figure everything out when I was younger. And maybe part of that, if a psychologist was listening, it was me more, stuffing feelings that I couldn't understand yet when I was in my teenage years. But even in cycling, I was definitely more hesitant from the business side to come out. I was selling medical devices and working at a hospital, and I just didn't know what shake. There were no other gay sales reps that I knew of, none that were open, and no one in my club that I knew was gay. And as I came out, more people reached out, and they're like, "Dude, I appreciate you doing this. Like, I haven't come out, but da 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 da." And I just, I hope that younger athletes can see that you can be out, you can be open, you can be whatever you want to be. um the relationships that you have will only get deeper, and yeah, there's going to be a few people that are gonna mind, but if that person minds that you're gay, like, do they really matter to you in the long run? Like, if your friend came out and was gay, they're not going to like them too. Isn't that kind of weird? And once I realized that, it just gave me more confidence to be myself. And yeah, when you made that comment back, you're like, "Oh, I'm gay too. This is cool." And it's always, yeah, I like to see some visibility. I think visibility is important, and it's yeah. So
Yeah, I
I want
think,
to make.
yeah.
Go ahead.
And I think what you said, like, you know, being open without holding the flag, I think that's kind of like where it's challenge. Like, the thing is, I feel like most people who know me really don't care. So for them,
Yeah.
like, I think like for me to talk about it, etc., like it's kind of boring, right? You know what I mean? At the same
Yeah.
time, I do feel like um, I have realized this year that a lot of young people, gay people, some, you know, it is really a lot more difficult than it has been in my mind still. You know, because I'm thinking like we're in 2024, like it must be so much easier now, right? But when you start to like talking to people, because I've never really had many gay friends, I never really been involved in the gay community until this like timeout panel where I kind of met some people who are like more active than me, right? So when you realize that like gay teenagers are 4 times more likely to hurt themselves still than like straight teenagers, that 70% of gay teenagers say they're like scared to participate in sports, etc., it becomes kind of like more important to me to make sure that people know more about myself and my journey, because maybe they meet somewhere else um, along the way that they would be dealing with more cautious, or maybe it inspires someone by chance, you know. But I did feel like I had a little bit of obligation to talk about it more this year for sure.
I think it's really interesting that you bring that up because I would also have the assumption like, oh, like there's so many more gay people and there's a lot more talk about it, but it's also way easier to get bullied. I mean, you're online and people can just, totally bash you. And if you come out, it's I cannot even imagine being 16 years old and being out and having those conversations with people. It took me until I was in my 30s to even start thinking about opening up about that. And it really I just couldn't live my life not being open anymore. It was just mentally too much of a struggle. I was like, this is, you know what? I don't know what's going to happen. I just can't live this way. Yeah, this could be a whole other podcast, but man. Oh, I wanted to point out for people that are going to go to the website, Rubber and Road, it's rubber, the letter N, road.com. Is the Instagram the same handle?
Yeah, correct.
Awesome. Guys, if you can afford this or if you have a spouse that is willing to get you a really Gucci gift, this should be on the top of your list. Go look, read more about it. Check them out online at least. Gil, thanks so much for your time.
Thank
Hope
you,
you keep
Brandon.
crushing it. And everybody, good luck with your training and racing. Check out the blog, the other YouTube videos, etc. And we'll talk to you soon.